Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My technical device here. Yes, as you know, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted a resolution in, I think, the 30th of December last year to request the International Court of Justice to give an advisory opinion on, say, Israel and the territories and everything, all legal questions almost in Israel and in relation to the conflict with the Palestinian Arabs. And in that we will discuss that in various sessions today, that request. But it is interesting to see in that request that they ask for the court to render an advisory opinion on questions. I will not repeat that questions. In other sessions they will do. Considering the rules and principles of international law, including the Charter of the United Nations. That's interesting, because via the Charter of the United Nations, we can refer, and we have to refer, to the birth certificates of the State of Israel. I will explain that later, but that is an interesting reference. The request does not refer to these birth certificates itself, but via Article 80 of the Charter, they appear to be very relevant, and that's what I'm going to explain to you this morning. And but where will we start? Well, I make a start at the first Zionist Congress in 18. Is it? Well, it was supposed to work, but 1897 in Basel, the first Zionist Congress, and the next one with the beautiful picture of, yes, here is Theodor Herzl at Basel, the first Zionist Congress in 1897, and they formulated there the so-called Basel Program, the political program of the Zionist movement, and there they adopted as the first point in that program, the aim of Zionism is to create for the Jewish people a homeland, a home in Palestine secured by public law. It was originally in German, öffentliches Recht. And that was the purpose and the aim of the Zionist organization. And you know maybe a little bit of the history, and that Herzl was very active and trying to get a support from the great powers of those days for his plans to create a Jewish home in Palestine, which was at that time part of the Ottoman Empire. So he went to the Sultan in at that time Constantinople, and nowadays Istanbul. He went to the Russian Tsar and his ministers. He went to the Pope and Italy, and so on and so forth. But then finally he found that the British government was willing to listen to him and even to support the idea. And that was in the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration, referring to the British Minister of Foreign Affairs, Arthur Balfour, and a letter written to Lord Rothschild, the representative of the Jewish community in the United Kingdom. And there the British government expressed the support of, His Majesty's government views which favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use its best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of the non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in other countries. That was the support of the British government, a unilateral statement, and we can debate whether that is as such binding in international law. There are some arguments for that, but it was a support by the British during the First World War. The troops of British troops and Australian and New Zealand troops were fighting in the area of Palestine against the Turks at that time. And the British government accepted this very important declaration, the Balfour Declaration, which supports the idea of the Zionist movement to establish a Jewish national home in Palestine. And after the war, this Balfour Declaration was used and brought in by the British government into the discussions in San Remo, which was part of the peace negotiations, which started in Versailles, but when it came to the situation of the Ottoman Empire, which was in decay, and which was lost the war together with Germany and the Austrian-Hungarian monarchy, they were discussing the future of the Ottoman Empire. And in the resolution adopted there in San Remo on the 25th of April 1920, they took the Balfour Declaration as the starting point for what had to be done in Palestine. And they formulated the similar words in that resolution, which is binding, we can see it as a binding treaty, that Palestine would become a mandate. I come to in a minute to the mandate system, and under the responsibility of the British government, and with the purpose to create a Jewish national home in Palestine, and also respecting the civil and religious rights of the other inhabitants of that area. Well, that is interesting. Turkey accepted this, and initially in the Treaty of Sèvres, but that was not, in fact, entered into force due to the developments in Turkey itself, regime change, etc. But it was later on accepted implicitly in the Lausanne Treaty. But it referred, I come back to this San Remo resolution, to the mandate system, because in the peace agreement of Versailles, the peace treaty, there was created the League of Nations, the predecessor of the United Nations, and it had in its covenant introduced a mandate system to deal with the territories of the parties who lost the war. The colonies, German colonies, for example, in Africa, and but also the parts of the Ottoman Empire. And they created for these territories and for the people living there mandates. That was a kind of development, progressive, you could say, development. It was not the old colonial approach. We take the colonies of our enemies who lost the war. No, it was a system which you find in Article 22 of the League of Nations. You can see that it is about creating a system to help the development of these territories and to govern them and taking into account the interests of the people living there and leading them eventually to stand on their own feet, to be independent. And that was in the League of Nations covenant in Article 22, and they created various types of mandates, A, B, and C, they have been called, also about the territories belonging to the former Turkish Empire, and they say they have reached a state of development where their existence as independent nations can be provisionally recognized, subject to rendering of administrative advice and assistance by a mandatory until such time as they are able to stand alone. So that this would be leading to independence. And this concerns the parts of the former Ottoman Empire, including Palestine. Well, in conformity with the San Remo resolution, the British government had the task to be the mandatory of this territory in Palestine, and it was formulated and made into a binding decision of the Council of the League of Nations in the mandate for Palestine, which was adopted in 1922. Here you see the various mandates created. The mandate of the British mandate of Palestine, that is present-day Israel, including present-day Jordan, by the way, Iraq, and French and Syria would become a French mandate. But the British would be mandatory power in Palestine and in Iraq. You can see on this map. And the mandate, oh yes, this a closer look at the. Okay. Hmm? Oh, thank you. Yeah. You see here the territory for the Palestine mandate. So that is Israel, including Jordan, and including the territories which are disputed in our days. And they are the object of the rules in the mandate for Palestine. And that is the next slide, which was adopted and which referred in the preamble, so the introductory considerations, referred to the Balfour Declaration of 1917. And we come back to that in a minute. The mandate for Palestine is imposed so that His Britannic Majesty with the powers under the mandate for the establishment of a Jewish home in Palestine. Here we have another part of this introduction. And I want to focus on this mandate because it is important and it is very special as compared to the other mandates. The mandate for Palestine, it took over almost literally the formulation of the Balfour Declaration in its central Article 2 of the central obligation, which refers to that the mandatory, say the British, shall be responsible for placing the country under such political, administrative, and economic conditions as will secure the establishment of the Jewish national home, as laid down in the preamble. You've seen the preamble. And you can see this quote, this Article 2, and the development of self-governing institutions, and also of safeguarding the civil and religious rights of all the inhabitants of Palestine, irrespective of race and religion. And there is something special about this mandate. I call it the unique character of this of the mandate for Palestine. Unique, and I take them. I had a quote here: the words of the British Secretary of the Colonies in 1939. It has to be recognized that the Palestine mandate is absolutely unique. There was no analogy in any other mandate for the proposal to set up in Palestine a country where there was already a considerable population of Arabs, a national home for another people, the Jews. Unquote. There is something special about this mandate, and especially about the beneficiaries of the mandate. The beneficiaries are the Jewish people. They are referred to in Article 2, and also in Article 6 and 7 and 4.1 and 2. You find it here. And in other mandates, it was about the population living in the various areas, in Iraq, in Syria, Lebanon, etc., Rwanda, Burundi, etc. For the people living there, the beneficiaries of the Palestine mandate are the Jewish people. Some of them were living in the land of in the area of Palestine, but many of them were not living there. One of the objectives of the Zionist movement was to bring people to the land of the forefathers and the land, Israel, the land of Israel. And so the beneficiaries are the Jewish people around the world. Therefore, you have in this mandate, and I hope it is also you see it in the next slide, Article 6, which provides for a right to facilitate Jewish immigration under suitable conditions and encourage the close settlement of Jews on the land. So, immigration and the settlement of Jews on the land. So they are the beneficiaries, the Jewish people living around the world. They had the right to immigrate and to settle in the land. And of course, the rights of the other people living there have to be respected, the civil and religious rights. But it's interesting, you see there, it's talking about a Jewish national home. It's not talking about an Arab national home. It's talking about the civil and religious rights of the Arab population, not about their political rights. And there was a proposal from the French in the San Remo discussions to include also political rights. That was not accepted because the political ambitions of the Arab population was addressed in many other parts of the Ottoman Empire, in the Iraq or Mesopotamian mandate, in the Syrian and Lebanese mandate, and also in a provision in the same mandate for Palestine, Article 25, which provides for the possibility of the mandatory power that the territories lying between the Jordan and the eastern boundary of Palestine, you see in the eastern boundary, what we now call Jordan, the mandatory shall be entitled, with the consent of the Council of the League of Nations, to postpone or withhold the application of such a provision as its mandate may consider inapplicable to the existing local conditions. Well, there are rather vague language to postpone or withhold application of the provision, but that was because the British had promised the Husseini family to create an emirate in what we now call Jordan, which eventually became the Hashemite kingdom of initially Transjordan and now Jordan. So that was provided for. So that was also to address the ambitions for self-determination of the Arab people. But all the area on the west side of the Jordan was destined for the creation of the Jewish national home. So the beneficiaries, that it is unique because of its beneficiaries. The Palestine mandate is also unique for the powers and duties of the mandatory. There were great powers created for the mandatory power for the British in the mandate. They had full powers in the field of legislation and administration of the territory, because if they would entrust that to the people living there, the Jewish national home could never be established because of the opposition of the, at that time still, Arab majority in the territory. Well, you may ask, what was the justification of this special, unique character of the mandate? And that is an important question, of course. Why this special situation, and why this special provision when it comes to the beneficiaries? Well, therefore we have to go back, I think, to the preamble. Let me see where the preamble is. I go back. Yes, here's the preamble. And it is said there, where is the... Yes, it's referring to the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine. First, the historical connection. Well, that is referring to the biblical history. It was the land of Israel in biblical times. It is nice to see here the kind of connection between international law and the Bible. And a second reason is the grounds for reconstituting their national home in that country. And there were many grounds. And Lord Balfour himself defended the Palestine mandate in the House of Lords. There was a lot of opposition against it in the House of Lords. It was for the majority of the Commons it was acceptable, but in the House of Lords he said, well, there is a reason to defend this mandate because of the grounds for reconstituting their national home. And in short, the Balfour referred to the persecution of the Jewish people during more than thousands of years, 1800 years or longer, in the Christian world. The persecution, the attempts of annihilation. Well, we know the history, the pogroms, but also earlier in the Middle Ages. There is a reason, there is a kind of responsibility of the Western world towards the Jewish people. And if there is a possibility now to give them their own land, their own territory, their own ancestral territory, then we should do it. That was the reason given by Balfour in a very impressive statement in the House of Lords. You can find it somewhere on the internet. So there were reasons for the mandate. Very good reasons. We move on. I have already said that the rights of the civil and the and religious rights of the other people or all people of the territory had to be respected. There are provisions in the mandate for the access to holy places, etc., etc. And the powers of the duties of the mandate we have spoken to. Well, there is one question sometimes asked. It refers to national home of the Jewish people, not to a Jewish national state. But, of course, the expression national home was taken from the first Zionist Congress and preserved during the time. But if it fits within the mandate system, and the purpose of the mandate system was to lead peoples and territories to independence. So the outcome would be a Jewish national state, a Jewish state. That was also the idea of important people in the negotiations, like Balfour himself, like Lloyd George, the British Prime Minister at that time. Okay. Well, I will not. We see in history a retreat of the mandatory. The British were reluctant to comply with all their obligations under the mandate, but then after the Second World War, they decided to get rid of the mandate, and they presented the problem to the General Assembly of the United Nations, and they came up with this partition plan, which Hillel referred to it this morning already, and the outcome of that was a very small Jewish state and a small Arab state on the territory of the mandate. It was a resolution of the General Assembly. It was not binding. It was initially completely rejected by the Arab side. It was accepted by the Yishuv, by the Jewish community reluctantly, but they accepted that there were so many people who survived the camps who wanted to live in freedom somewhere. So, but it was never implemented and never. It has, in my view, no legal relevance. On 14 May of 1948, the Jewish state was declared, the Declaration of Independence, and you find there the famous picture. And now I come to my final question, which is important. Is the mandate relevant today? In my view, it is still relevant, referring to Article 80 of the UN Charter, which is a transitional provision from the League of Nations mandate system to the UN trusteeship system. And it says in Article 80 that except as may be agreed upon individual trusteeships agreements, never has one been adopted in respect of Palestine, and until such agreements have been concluded, they have never been concluded, nothing in this chapter shall be construed in or of itself to alter in any manner the rights whatsoever of any states, and listen, or any peoples, or the terms of the existing instruments, etc. So it it is not, it's the rights of the peoples under the mandate system should not be altered, says Article 80 of the UN Charter. And this is sometimes called the Palestinian provision or article. It was with purpose, the reference to peoples was introduced. The father of Benjamin Netanyahu contributed to that at those times. And in order to preserve the rights of the Jewish people under the mandate. And that is still relevant, legally speaking, for the advisory opinion, but also for the status of the territories, the disputed territories, for the status of Jerusalem, for the so-called settlements, the right to, as you know, immigrate and settle in the territory. That is the relevance of the mandate. And Israel, yes, it is a state. It is a legitimate state. And I have to finish now. We have seen it has a very strong legitimacy having regard to the birth certificates. It is, of course, to the standard of international law, a legitimate state. It has a territory. It has a population. It has a government. It has the capacity to enter into relations with other states, as we have seen the definition. And I hope the Court of Justice will take all these things into account when they formulate their advisory opinion, which is maybe not a good idea, but if they start to accept that request and formulate advisory opinion, they should look at Article 80 of the Charter and then keep in mind the mandate for Palestine. Thank you.